Okay, so I left off last week at step 5 from this article from Robert Wagner, which I found out, by the way, is not an article. Some subscriber mentioned, a subscriber mentioned, not some subscriber, a subscriber mentioned that this is part of a larger book, which I looked up on Amazon, and I may check out the entire thing when I get a moment to. Where I had stopped last week was when I was talking about the fact that by the time you get to step 5, you can no longer claim that you have any higher power you want to. You can no longer say, and I didn't, gotta move the chair, I know, again. I had just given it some WD-40 in the last couple of videos, no squeak, now it's squeaking again. But anyway, I had left off at the part of step 5 where he had come to the conclusion, which he had laid out and which I had added my own thoughts to, that by the time you get to step 5, you can no longer just have any old God you want to. Like AA says, you can't really believe whatever you want to any longer. And I'm going to pick up right where I had left off and just go from there. I don't know if I'll even be able to cover the rest of it. We're going to go through all 12 steps with this particular portion of the book. It's not an article that I found out. And I got a couple other videos in mind as well. There is a subscriber that wants me to point out a legal type thing that went down in Canada, which further proves that AA is a religion. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself here. So I'm going to pick a point. I fast forwarded the last video up to where I had stopped, and I had interjected a lot of my own thoughts into the thing to the point that I couldn't exactly give you the last actual line I read, but I'll just pick up from a good place, and we'll go from there. It says, AA stresses, this is Warner talking, I believe I said that right, yeah, Robert Wagner. AA stresses that agnostics and atheists can work the program by adopting their own concept of God. Inherent in this position is that the answers actually come from within the person, since the atheist doesn't have a God. And again, I want to clarify the thing about an atheist not having any God. An atheist position, for the most part, is simply if I don't have any evidence for believing in something, and nobody has demonstrated any evidence for believing in something, then the default position is non-belief. If I told you, for example, that right here in this empty space, in this square, that something exists, and you said, well, can you prove to me that there's something in that empty space other than molecules and protons or whatever it is that makes up the empty air? And I said, well, it's up to you to prove that there's nothing there. That's not exactly how it works. If I'm making a claim that there is something here in between this invisible square that I'm drawing, and I say I have no way to demonstrate that there's something there, that I have no way to prove that there's something there, that I can't actually test or show or any observable way for something to be there, but I believe there's something there. The natural position that you're going to say is, well, until I see some evidence here, I'm not going to take your word for it that there's something there. Until I see some evidence, I just don't believe that there's anything there. So it's not really a belief position, and I think a lot of people confuse that an atheist position is absolutely there is no God. And like I've said before on here, I'm not necessarily an atheist per se, but a lot of people misinterpret atheism to be the position of saying there is no God, can't be no God. That's not what atheism is doing. Atheism is saying, I haven't seen anybody demonstrate any concrete proof that there's a God without committing some type of logical fallacy of some sort. Like if someone says something like, well, look at the stars, the stars, I mean, this couldn't have all been made by itself. You're kind of putting forth two arguments. You're putting forth an argument from wonder and an argument from ignorance. You're saying that there's no way that you can explain this, so therefore it has to be some creator behind it all. So anyway, that's the atheist position. I'll keep going. Step 5 expressly advises against someone having a God of their own understanding, or in an atheist case, saying, my inner soul or psychology or whatever it is you would call, because really to tell an atheist you got to have a higher power, or even somebody who's agnostic or somebody who's just not religious in general, you got to have a higher power that you got to believe in, is kind of insulting, because it flies against the grain of everything someone who's skeptical or atheist or whatever would believe. You got to believe in something that you can't prove. That kind of flies in the face of being an atheist to begin with. But anyway, Confessing to another person is expressly defined as preventing us from acting on advice which comes from within our own minds or from a vague, undefined, abstract notion of a higher power. If an atheist asks another person to interpret his conversion with God, then the atheist is obeying the other person's religious convictions rather than his own. AA claims to welcome atheists into the program as long as they obtain approval of their meditations from a person more experienced in communicating with God. I mean, the whole entire AA program is talking about having a direct line of communication to God. And once this person has done this, the AA says they will consider him a man as long as he works step 6 properly. How many people used to sit in meetings and say, this step is important, this step is this is where the one that separates the men from the boys, Well, if you want to call sitting in meetings the rest of your life, smoking one cigarette right after the other, I say that as a smoker, and you're drinking coffee and talking terrible about everybody while blowing your own horn about what a wonderful human being you are and how you're more superior to 99% of the population because you're chosen by God as being a man, I would just say that your definition of a man differs greatly from my definition of a man, but I remember hearing that all the time, the men from the boys, and they would always say this really stupid thing about where the rubber meets the road. Rubber meets the road. You're talking about backing out of your driveway with your tires, onto the road? Is that what you're talking about? You're making it sound like it's just some major crucible that you have passed through by rubber meeting roads. Okay. Anyway. So up to this point, he's going to reiterate what this article's been covering, what I've been covering in the last video. He's going to reiterate it all for us right here. In step 1, a simple admission of powerlessness is mandated. You got to do that one, right? Later, we find out that this means that you're saying no human power can take away your desire to drink. Step 2, you're told to believe in a power greater than yourselves, but the AA group suffices for that power. Step 3, you find that you actually did in step 2 without even realizing it because of the way that it's carefully worded and the way it baits and traps you in. But according to the literature, you've decided to turn your will over to a newfound providence. And to proceed any further, you got to depend on somebody or something else. And then you take what is billed as a non-religious moral inventory, which evolves from a personal examination, which is not a thorough examination because all it's doing is summing up your angers and your fears and sex, AA has a very anti-sex attitude, almost to this bizarre, twisted Puritan level of insanity, can't have sexual desire. I used to see AA people actually brag on that. I haven't experienced sexual desire in over 2 or 3 years. Yeah, right. Tell another one. I feel sorry for you if that's the case. Why would you want to get to that point? But anyway, so we're proceeded to take this non-religious moral inventory, which evolves from a personal examination to search for how we have committed the 7 deadly sins, which is in the literature, and has caused us to lose the desire to seek and do God's will. At this point, you can't say you believe in whatever you want to believe in. Now in step 5, you're told to non-religiously confess these 7 deadly sins to God. This is where we find that although our own conception of God is sufficient to work the program, we need the approval of another person in the program to be sure that we're not wrong about our conception of God, because our conception of God, according to Bill W. in his book, may be garbled by our own rationalization. In other words, if you have a higher power and it doesn't fit in the AA's definition of what a higher power should be, they'll just tell you, well, that's your own alcoholic thinking, that's your own garbled rationalization. Which I think is kind of comical that Bill W. talks about anybody's thinking and rationalizations being garbled when he's got this utter nonsense program, And then it's in step 6 and 7 that we find out why. AA makes it clear that the objective is of God and not a self-determined objective. This is the step that separates the men from the boys. Step 4, it introduced AA theories on instincts. Creation gave us instincts for a purpose, which, by the way, until you demonstrate to me that instincts are nothing more than an evolutionary trait that we have evolved to have in order to continue surviving, and that there's not no real purpose behind instincts other than, evolution doesn't have a divine purpose behind it. Evolution is not some abstract thing that exists up here in the stratosphere somewhere that's got a tweaking and a tuning of the design in order to bring us to some great destiny. Evolution is merely adapting and surviving. And I could go on about that, but that'll be a whole nother video. But he does say in the big book, creations gave us instinct for a purpose. Those desires are perfectly necessary and right, and surely God-given. Perfectly necessary and right. Instincts. You mean hunger is perfectly necessary and right. You mean the creator of the universe couldn't have snapped his finger like that and said, maybe nature doesn't need to be a slaughterhouse where one thing is eating another thing and then consuming something else. And I don't know what you mean by perfectly necessary and right. I mean, the idea that you need sex or the idea that you have sexual desire is perfectly necessary and right. In other words, what you're saying is sex is only for the circumstances that you deem appropriate for it to be. AA uses words interchangeably. Desires and instincts are used in each other's place. In step 6, this method is used to further explore instincts as they relate to AA. To cure our alcoholism, we must return to God's ideal for us, for which we have drifted. You haven't proved to me that God has an ideal for me. You haven't proved to me that any higher power I want to in the universe has an ideal for me. So right here and there, with him saying God's ideal for me, you can abandon any idea or any pretension that this is not a cult religion. This is a religious program. Okay, you can't even use spirituality on something like that because you're telling me what God wants. You're telling me what God gave me. You're telling me how to worship God, and you're telling me that I'm a sinner who's unclean in the sight of God because I've drifted away from his ideal. Anyway, it goes on further in the literature to say that when instincts drive us blindly, I can't talk tonight for some reason, or we willfully demand that they supply us with more than do us. Where do you get off, Bill W., telling me what's due to me? Where do you get off in telling me where my instincts exceed what you think they should exceed? But you're not a religion. That's the point which we depart from the degree of perfection that God wishes for us here on earth. You're speaking for God, Bill. You don't know if there is a God, you don't know what it is or what it wants. You're trying to claim that I can have any higher power that I want to, that I can believe in anything I want to and do your stupid program. But now you're telling me what God wants and what God thinks. You're telling me you are a spokesman for God. So this is no longer anything about this, anything other than what it is, a religion. So the difference between the boys and the men is the difference between striving for a self-determined objective. Well, wait a minute. How am I going to have a self-determined objective if my self-will is useless? And for the perfect objective, which is of God. So you've abandoned any pretense of spiritual principles. You've abandoned any pretense of me being able to do this on my own. You've abandoned all of that. Now you're speaking on behalf of God or the universe, and you're telling me what God wants. You're not taking into account the fact that there were probably I don't know how many thousands of spiritual paths and faiths and religions and ideas and philosophies that totally different from your weird, twisted idea about God. But somehow or the other, Bill W. has got the only correct version. Frank Buckman and Bill W. have got the only correct interpretation of what God might be on the other side of space-time and logic. He knows. He knows more than all the religions. He knows more than all the philosophical conjectures. He knows more than all the other belief systems. He knows what we're supposed to do because we're God's chosen people as alcoholics. That's about it in a nutshell, is it not? Step 7 specifically concerns itself with humility. Indeed, attainment of greater humility is the foundation principle of all of these 12 steps. Without humility, no alcoholic can stay sober at all. Bill's words. Humility, to me, is really twisted here because humility is not somebody proclaiming themselves a microphone and mouthpiece for some God and telling me what God wants, what God thinks, and what God desires for me. That's not humility. That's fucking delusion. Delusion and arrogance. You would have to be incredibly arrogant to think that you know more than all the other religious systems and all the other ideas and all the other different belief systems or anything else out there. You know exactly what everybody wants, what God really wants. And you call yourself humble? Not only are you arrogant as all get out, you're literally saying that you got a direct wire to God and that you know what God wants and what God desires. You're delusional at this point. This is how things change in AA, Wagner writes, as the program progresses. Things start out defined as non-religious, humility, but are changed to require religious action, a desire to seek and do God's will. Not spiritual at all. So now he's going to jump forward. He's going to skip the amendment steps. I could do a little bit of talking on my own about that, but for the purposes of this video, which the title of is 12 Steps is Just Conversion, I could talk about how 8 and 9 are just blatting your own horn. You're going around telling everybody, I'm a wise man, come down from the mountain now, and I have to apologize to you, you fucking human, normal earth people who are not alcoholic and don't have this gift from God. Because if I don't do this, if I don't grandstand and show you what a spiritual guru that I am, I may drink again. Doesn't have nothing to do with me being sorry that I maybe fucked you over, treated you like shit, or abused you, or something like that. It's because of God and me and the program, But he's going to jump forward to step 11, sort through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him, praying only for the knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. In step 11, all further debate about the existence of God is now over. To those one-time agnostics, according to Bill W., he writes, who still cling to the AA group as their higher power, claims for the higher power of prayer may, despite all the logic and experience and proof of it, still be quite objectionable in AA's big book. We recoiled from meditation and prayer as obstinately as the scientist who refused to perform a certain experiment lest it prove his pet theory wrong. Bill doesn't understand science. That's not how science works exactly. Too many people, I think, have this notion of this idea that science is some kind of holy institution that's up here somewhere, off in the distance, hidden behind all these grand buildings with all of these guys in lab coats that are secretly working on something and that they're never wrong about anything at all. That's not science. Science is about testing, observing, and studying. Okay, the theory of evolution, which pretty much is well established as far as evidence is concerned, it could be overturned. Okay, if somebody out there could prove that evolution was false and that literally the planet got spoken into existence because Bill W.'s God said, I want an earth with alcoholics and here it is, that would be a big deal. The scientific method of being able to observe and test something like that would be huge. You'd probably get a fucking Nobel Prize or something for something like that. He's acting like a scientist is recoiling from an experiment. That's not what a scientist is supposed to do anyway. But nobody recoils from prayer and meditation because, I don't want to do that. It might work. There might be a God behind the prayer and the meditation. No, you're recoiling from the prayer and meditation because you're saying to yourself, I joined this organization in the hope that I would quit drinking, and I found myself now in this fucking religious cult that claims that I got a direct phone line to God through a direct dialing system or something. Do you have long distance calling after 9 o'clock? Older people will know what I'm talking about there. Except for dealing with the occasional relapse over the convert back into atheism, this is the end of atheism as far as AA is concerned. Because it goes further in the literature to say, of course, when we finally did experiment with prayer and meditation, we experienced unexpected results. We felt different. In fact, we knew different. And so we were now sold on meditation and prayer. Okay, after this in step 12, AA freely admits that this program is aimed at converting the non-believer to the believer and the believer to AA religion. The last step here, having had a spiritual awakening, as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. AA summarizes the indoctrination process in step 12. In step 3, those who were atheists discovered AA would suffice as a higher power. In step 11, the persistent use of prayer and meditation did open the channel so that where there had been just this little bitty trickle, there was now a river, which led to sure power and safe guidance from God as we were increasingly loved AA group. The higher power would presently love God and call him by name according to their own literature. And Wagner goes on to write, in AA will still claim they're not religious. And AA itself proves explicitly over and over again that that's a lie. This is not a mistake. This is not a misunderstanding. This is not something that I might be reading wrong or interpreting wrong. It is a bold-faced lie. Okay? The Big Book states on page XX in its foreword that AA is not a religious organization, but it contradicts this premise and makes it a lie in its appendix. In this appendix excerpt from page 569 of the third edition, the term spiritual experiences is Bill W.'s bullshit, and spiritual awakening are used many times in this book, which upon careful reading shows that the personality change sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism has manifested itself among us in many different forms. Yet it's true that our first printing gave many readers the impression that these personality changes or religious experiences must be in the nature of sudden or spectacular upheavals. Happily for everyone, the conclusion is erroneous. And AA writes explicitly, he says that what they aim for in religious experiences, and then they deny it. Their aim is to make you love God and call him by name in their literature, period. When they report to the government attendance at these meetings designed to create religious experiences, they take this deceit to a very, very dangerous level. They help government establish a state religion for people with addiction problems. I didn't expect it to be actually as short as the other one. The other one I went on for quite a long time, even though I'm actually 21 minutes into this already. But yeah, these two things right here would show you beyond a shadow of all reasonable doubt that AA is a religion, and that the 12 steps are designed to convert you to the AA religion. And I think it's funny, again, that Bill W. speaks as some voice for God. You know, God wants you to be like this. You strayed too far from God's will. You appointed yourself the spokesman for God. Bill W., you know. In order to believe that, in order to truly believe that, you would have to believe that humanity got spoken into existence, that way back all the way, and by the way, this is an article I read that found that the earliest traces of beer, for example, were found in ancient China over 4,000 years ago. The ancient Egyptians had wine and other drinks. Even in the biblical text, they drink wine. Even in the Shakespearean plays and things like that, they mention people being addicted to alcohol. So what you've got here is over 1,935 years of history at the time of Bill W., and that's after Common Era. That's not before Common Era. That's not counting the thousands of years before that. I'm just giving you the AD version of events. So after 1,935 years of people having problems with alcohol, being addicted to alcohol, this creator being decides to find this guy who's a member of a Nazi-supporting organization that thinks Adolf Hitler was sent down by God from heaven. This higher power has to come to him in a hospital room while he's tripping out on LSD, and it has to tell him, I want you to write my commandments, and these commandments are going to fail 95% of the population at the time, and that you're going to get this book published, and that you're going to steal most of the proceeds from the people you promised royalties to, and you're going to have such a large failure rate with this book that you have to go on speaking tours and press tours and everything else to try to sell people the idea of this religion that I'm beaming down to you from heaven above to save alcoholics' lives, even though I haven't cared about alcoholics for 1,935 years. And I'm going to let this organization not flourish, not save millions of lives. I'm going to let it fall almost into obscurity for the next 30 some odd years until somebody else comes along and decides to make it a state-sponsored religion by buddying up to Republicans and Democrats in government office and making it a multi-billion-dollar a year institution who's still going to fail 95% of the people that are brought into it. That's what I'm supposed to believe. I'm supposed to believe that all this is some kind of miracle that come down out of the sky to only give people a 95% failure rate, to make the government and the government cronies and the treatment centers and the halfway house owners really rich off of stealing people's tax dollars to fund this bullshit, that addiction rates in this country are climbing, that more people are dying than ever from addiction in this country, but God wanted Bill W. to write this horseshit program that doesn't really save hardly anybody's life. That all adds up perfectly and totally logically. Anyway, that's kind of a short follow-up to last week's video of There is something I want to talk about next week before I get to my subscriber about the Canadian fiasco involving the legal system. You've heard the story millions of times in AA meetings and probably in treatment centers, and you probably were forced to watch that movie, My Name is Bill W., with James Garner and James Woods. And you probably believe that somewhere along the way, Bill W. got drunk and called Bob on the phone because he called some church up and said, I don't know what's going on with me. I know this doesn't make no sense whatsoever, but I need to talk to another alcoholic. And these two guys got together and boom, AA became what it became. That is actually not factually correct at all. In fact, that's the version AA wants you to believe took place. That's the version AA would like for you to accept. But there's a lot more to that story than just that. In fact, it used to make me sick in meetings when I would hear old timers say, yeah, these two guys accidentally met one another. And you know what that was? It wasn't accidental. It was a God-done deal. I mean, a God-done deal? Can you get more fucking lame than to say something like that? That's fucking pathetic. But no, Bill W. called a reverend in the Oxford group and said he wanted to talk to an Oxford group member with a drinking problem. And yeah, it kind of went from there. And then he bummed off Bob. And one of the people who introduced him to Bob later on said she wished she had never met Bill W. because he was a taker and a manipulator, and pretty much he just moved in with Bob and became kind of like a parasite, like he was with his wife. Hey, give me food, give me clothes, and let me go around and preach to people and do nothing all day long. That's pretty much what it was all about. I'll go into more detail about that in the next video. But there was something on the comments that I wanted to read because somebody had pointed out I use straw man arguments a lot when I'm pointing out logical fallacies on here, even though there's a lot more logical fallacies that AA commits. And even though I touched on some of those logical fallacies, there was a video I did about what I call a straw man. And a straw man, as I've explained before, is if I create a parody of what someone is saying, and I attack I attack the parody as an attempt to invalidate the person. Like if I'm trying to think of something that would be non-controversial and non-political to give a good idea for. Let's just say off the top of my head that I said to somebody, if somebody asked me about a football team, and I said, well, I'm not really much of a sports person, and they said, oh, so you're one of those fucking weirdos that doesn't like sports, and you're one of those fucking weirdos that does this, that, and the other, and makes all these character attacks. I didn't say any of those things. I didn't advocate for any of these things you're attacking me for. I just said I'm not a sports person, right? That's kind of a straw man. But anyway, this particular subscriber points out that there's more going on to AA than a straw man. I'm going to read that comment. And I do need to delve more in the logical fallacies on here. I keep, I got all these things that I want to do running through my head. I should write them down probably. But it says, there's more at work here than a straw man. It's mind control technique. Cult expert Stephen Hassan, I think I'm saying his name right, describes mind control as a person or a group that attempts to force an identity onto you that you would not choose yourself if given the choice. Pop culture had so inundated me with the word alcoholic, I didn't really have a hard time saying, yeah, I'm an alcoholic. I used to joke about it back in my drinking days prior to AA. No, I'm not an alcoholic, I'm a drunk. There was something romantic to me about being a drunk, something positively bohemian about being a drunk. All the great authors and all the great musicians, they're all drunks. It was, anyway, not to distract. But I would not have chosen to call myself a sick, diseased alcoholic without the cult, is what they're pointing out to here. So I'm going to read this and quit derailing it. Another manipulative technique is to redefine normal events as some kind of sign that the alcoholic is to be broken. Notice how Bill W. describes resentments as if they're only problems for people who are alcoholic. In reality, everyone deals with these kinds of issues, but he pretends otherwise. The goal is to get the person to believe that all aspects of themselves are a sign of the sickness so that they can distrust their own identity and rely on the group to make decisions for them. And he's very, very correct with this. They have their slogans like, don't go into your head alone, it's a dangerous neighborhood. Or they try to conflate academic pursuits with arrogance and vanity by saying things like, you've got to get dumb to get this program. I think his book is worth a read because it helps you see through the deception of the big book. You truly understand that what you're seeing, and you feel validated by the fact that a national expert on cult is describing these things. I don't think Hassan has come out against any 12-step movement specifically, but you can read between the lines and apply his defenses and logic to any situation to protect yourself. 100% right on. I agree with you there. Totally, 100%. What AA does is it takes normal human emotions and normal human feelings, and it tries to twist those things into alcoholic traits and make it feel like that only people with drinking problems feel this way, that only people with drinking problems act like this. And then it does that on purpose. So now if everything about you, every thought, every action, every idea, every plan, everything that you have about you is directly tied into being a sick alcoholic, you can trust nothing about yourself any longer. If I take pride in doing a hard day's work for whoever I'm working for, I can't actually trust that any longer because I'm a sick alcoholic. I'm probably doing it for weird reasons. If I take pleasure in music, for example, I can't really trust that I really take pleasure in music. It's just my ego wanting to tell everybody else that I take pleasure in music. It's pride, it's sin. In other words, everything about yourself you can't trust any longer. And then AA comes in and says, we got to do all your thinking for you in the meantime. There was somebody on here who made a comment that they were describing a person who's a teetotaler to an AA old-timer. And the AA old-timer told him, well, this person you're talking about definitely has untreated alcoholism. And, of course, when he told him, well, the person I'm talking about is a teetotaler and never drank once in their life, then he got angry and started accusing them of resentments and too much knowledge and all that other shit. I would read the comment if I had it in front of me, but I don't. So stay tuned for next week. I'll try to delve into the real story behind Bill and Bob meeting one another. Until next time.